what would you tell a young listener who wants to change the world but doesn't know the next steps?
Everybody wants to like add value, right? Like, how do I add value to this business? Or I'm going to add so much value to this and that. And even when people hit you up and cold call you, it's all about adding value, right? And I think so few people take the time to figure out what they value before you add value back to somebody else. And I think that's something that I've been trying to spend a lot of time thinking about like, what do I actually value? And then does that reflect in what I'm trying to do as far as adding value back into people's life? Because it seems like everybody wants to rush ahead of like changing the world, but it's like, what matters to you first? Like change your world and then go out and change the world, right? Because if you're just going out trying to change other people's worlds, like you're not doing anybody any service.
Trusted and proven, pushing the limits on every shot. We never fear failure. Join us as we set ourselves against the odds, bringing you cutting-edge voices in every industry. This is the Ironclad Podcast. All right, today's guest, Bryan Papé, the mastermind behind the brand MiiR. MiiR is an incredible company. We've been big fans for a while. We've got MiiR swag at Ironclad, so this one was a really good one for us. He talks a lot about leadership and about making an impact. He talks about transparency. MiiR is doing awesome things globally. You want to check this episode out. Here's our conversation with Bryan Papé. Well, let's kick this thing off, man. Like I said, I really appreciate you coming on. And the cool thing is to Jesse's point, we've been fans of the brand forever.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I was introduced to the brand, I think, probably about 4 years ago when we send out these things called Iron Sharpens Iron packages to all of our clients, and we do it for Christmas. And we look for things that are items that people are going to love. We want it to, even if you get a pin, we want it to be a Sharpie with felt tip. We want it to be your favorite pin. And if we were going to send a mug, we want it to be your favorite mug. So the first time we actually sent the Growler, and those were huge, man.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So I think we have a lot in common. We're both fans of leadership and we're both entrepreneurs. But another thing, I named my son after my granddad, Johnny. And I know you were a big influence from your grandfather, weren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah.
How did he influence you for leadership in business?
Some of it has kind of been just, really hearing stories from my grandmother and my dad and my aunt and uncle. So unfortunately, my grandfather passed away in 97. So I was I a teenager? I think I was a teenager at that time. And so I wasn't, I wish I was in business when he was still around, but, you go anywhere within the family company and you hear these, stories about, how he, kind of operated his business and, I think some of the stories that influenced me were, if you go to some of the, locations where they sell and repair commercial equipment, the mechanics who have been there for decades would talk about how he would come in the back door when he'd come and visit a location, and he would shake their hands and he'd talk to the mechanics, and so I think a lot of times people think that, when you're the CEO or the boss, you roll in and you go through the front door and you talk to, the head of sales, the VPs, or, those folks. But he always rolled in through the back door, and he did that because he was like, these are the lifeblood of my company, so always making sure that you're paying attention to the people on the front lines. So I've always remembered that. And, whether it's headed into our cafe and, going to the back door and checking with our brand ambassadors or our customer service team, that story's always stuck with me.
That's great, man. And I know that you've had a pretty interesting start, right? You were inspired through a pretty scary situation, weren't you, to start the business? Yeah.
So MiiR was really kind of an inspiration from. I've always thought about this idea of merging business and philanthropy. This idea that kind of the old model is, you build a company and you amass wealth, and then you give the wealth away later on in life. And I thought, well, what if you just do it every day, right? What if you're generous every single day? And so, part of that. Came to life in 2006 when I was in a pretty bad ski accident, kind of a life or death ski accident where I ended up breaking my femur. And when you break your femur, you can essentially bleed to death internally in about 10 minutes if you hit your femoral artery. And so for me, I had this kind of like reflective moment in my life where there were two things that kind of distilled for me in that short time. Was the first was my wife. We had been dating for about 3 years, and I thought this woman's incredible. I should probably figure this out and go ahead and ask her to marry me. And so that was kind of the first thing I thought about. And the second thing I thought about was what would people say about me at my funeral? And it realized that I had been living this life of selfish self-absorption. Just, it was all about me and how much money I could make. And so that was kind of a catalyst for me to realize, even if you don't make it to the end of your life, and if you were successful and you waited to the end of your life, you wouldn't be able to be generous at that point. So that was kind of a spark for me. And then 2009 had the opportunity to start MiiR.
Wow. Before that, were you into business, or were you just kind of...
Yeah, I had started multiple businesses, and on a smaller scale. But I was always kind of an entrepreneur. I was always kind of tinkering with things, and this idea that I think I had one like real job in my life. And I worked. I think it was. Gosh, I'm trying to think of which year it was. There were two jobs. I worked for my family's company for a summer, stocking parts and basically cleaning forklifts. And it was good to kind of see that side of the business from my family's business. But the other one I had, I think it was the year before that, I was actually just a retail associate at Banana Republic. My brother-in-law worked there, and he was like, "Oh, I can get you a job at Banana Republic." And I was like, "All right, I guess I'll work there, folding clothes." And it just killed me because I get my schedule at the beginning of the week, and I would do the math on like my hourly rate times the hours. And I was like, I'm only going to make, $50 this week, like that just killed me that there was no opportunity for me to make more. Right. Like it just was what it was. And so I found myself just like folding clothes, just extremely bored. The only way was to sell more credit cards. That was the only way to like actually, increase. They had like, competitions and perks. And so for me, I've always kind of liked the idea of having something where it could scale more than just, what you get paid per hour. I think one of my favorite stories was in I think it was elementary school. So this is like, pre-internet days. And we had moved from Portland to Boise, Idaho. And in Portland, I learned how to make origami paper cranes. And in Boise, Idaho, nobody had ever seen these things before. And so I had a bunch of paper, and I made these origami cranes, and I would like basically sell them at lunch. So I basically convinced kids, instead of buying lunch, to buy these, paper cranes. And so I'd hustle kids lunch money for these cranes. Nice. And, I'd switch out the color and be like, "Oh, well, I only have blue today. You better get the blue one today." And so I've always kind of been entrepreneurial. I picked up a video camera in high school and started making short films and whatnot. So that kind of ultimately led to starting kind of a small media production company, which, when I had the ski accident, I was filming for a local mountain, making a movie for them. And so those are always kind of things that I've been involved in. And then the company I was with right before I started MiiR, my buddy Rick Wood started this company called Little Hottie's Hand Warmers. And basically it's air-activated hand warmers that you see at Costco and REI and outdoor sporting goods stores. So at the time, my business mentor in college, his best friend started this company, and he couldn't afford to hire anybody. So I interned for him and ended up being the first employee there. And then we had this great run for about 3 years and learned everything from small business, from sourcing to manufacturing to shipping to invoicing to payroll to, really everything in small business. And then we ended up selling the company in 2009. And then after that, I worked for the company we sold to for about a year, and then kind of said, all right, I'm going to go start this company called MiiR that I've been dreaming about. So it's always kind of been there.
That's cool, man. Yeah, that's awesome how things lead to another thing, especially with entrepreneurs. It's always something that leads to something. So why hydration?
For me, it was at the time, it sounds funny now because there's so many different bottles on the market, but at the time in 2009, it was, I'd been using Nalgene's growing up, camping and backpacking. It was a great product. So it's kind of like Nalgene. At the time, SIG, which was like this Swiss aluminum bottle, and Clean Canteen were kind of the only brands in the marketplace. There was some Stanley here and there, but nothing really stood out to me from a design perspective. And certainly nobody was really giving back or had a model of generosity. And so it started with designing a really functional, which sounds so funny now, but the Nalgene product. You basically the lid would hit you in the face, if you weren't holding it back. The wide mouth was so big, you'd spill water on your face. And then, the Swiss bottle was actually a fuel canister for camping stoves that just happened to become a water bottle. So, these products weren't really meant for drinking out of properly. And so we ended up designing it. This is one of our first bottles, with a narrow mouth, and it fits in a cup holder. Yet you can stick ice in it, one twist opening. So the drinkware was something that we thought we saw an opportunity to design something different. And then from there, we wanted to build this model of generosity from day one. So we started giving to clean water from day one.
That's great, man. What kind of hurdles did you hit out of the gate? I know we've had so many, and at this point for us, as an entrepreneur or a leader, you almost don't even look at them as hurdles. You just kind of accept them as part of the path, you know? But,
Yeah.
but when I ask you that, something that stuck out to you specifically, have you had some major milestones that have been like, man, I don't know if we're going to make it through it?
Oh, totally. There's more than I could recall, because it's the obstacle is the way if you're an entrepreneur, you know, and there's no guarantees. But at the same time, I think that's partially why entrepreneurs are attracted to the path of starting something that, you know, there is no guarantee, but there's also this opportunity, this ability that, you know, it could work out. And if it doesn't, I've always been really comfortable with the idea that if it doesn't work out, what is the worst case scenario? You know, is the worst case scenario I have to move back in with my parents or my in-laws, you know, or, you know, kind of eat humble pie for a couple of years and work somewhere else and, you know, eat rice and beans, so to speak. And I've always been like, I don't want that to happen, but I've always been really comfortable knowing that like my identity is more than just like what I start or fail at. And so if that's the worst case and I'm cool with that, great. I'm going to go out and like push as hard as I can, knowing that like I don't want to fail. And if I do fail, it's, you know, I'll be all right. So, you know, at the end of the day, like I'm not going to, you know, hopefully die from this thing. Even though lately it's been very scary.
Yeah.
But you know, some of the hurdles early on, you know, you run into just like, it seems like every year, there's always something. Like, you know, this year with COVID-19 and a couple years ago, there was like a port strike in Seattle. I mean, this might have been like 5 years now, but there was like a port strike. So all of our inventory was stuck at the port in Seattle. And so it was just like a crushing cash flow moment where like all of our product was at the port. And so if you're not shipping, you're not billing your customers, which means you're not receiving payment. And so, you know, there's all these things where there's constant setbacks and you keep pushing through it. And, you know, you'd have, you know, of course, when you don't want something held up, customs, you know, randomly inspects your containers, you know, or whatever else it is, or, there's always tons of setbacks for sure. But it's a matter of, you know, kind of pushing through, kicking those doors down or jumping over the hurdles or whatever you want to call it. But you got to just have that mindset that you're going to get through it.
Yeah, I think that some of those things forge you as a leader as well. I think it tests and it makes you, when you reevaluate and really do your self-inspection, you say, man, was I everything I could have been as a leader there, or where did I fail? How have you kind of landed, and where have you landed with your leadership philosophy?
Yeah, I feel like it's an evolving journey, you know, especially even now, you know, with these COVID times, you know, we're kind of, you know, rethinking about what does business look like in the future, and really reflected on the past year and what went well and what didn't go so well, and how do we adjust, you know, especially from like a leadership perspective. I think over the last year we were growing so fast and there was so much to do that I really kind of took my eye off of like developing our people and coaching our people and like really paying attention to culture and kind of just letting it happen. And it's not anywhere in a negative space, but just realizing how important it is to like feel connected when you're distant, and now remote working, for me, really understanding like what my role is as founder and CEO. And I think that's, like I said, it's always a journey, and it's adjusting. And I think especially for a growing company and a growing business, your role changes so much, right? So from day one, when you're doing everything, so like I can do the books, I've done product design, I've done sourcing, I've done shipping, I've done invoicing, I've done, you know, pick and pack, all of it, right? But then like as you grow throughout your business, you have to adjust and adapt and you know, take on new skills and you know, learn. You know, I made the decision to hire an executive coach, 3 or 4 years ago now. You know, I didn't even know what an executive coach was when I started the company, right? You know, I just figured executives knew what to do, right? And then you become an executive and you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yep. I know it.
So I think, you know, eating humble pie and knowing that you're special enough to get things done, but also knowing that you're nothing in the context of like the human race or the universe, and knowing that in that light, you know, it's important to make sure that you're evolving.
Yeah, and man, it's so cool to hear about the coaching. I'm a big advocate, and before I just thought it was like, I didn't think it was a doers kind of thing. I thought that some people just do, and some people just are always reading or always want to be coached, and I didn't put much stock in it. And then I look at the best athletes in the world, the best performers in the world, they have coaches.
Totally.
And I became a believer. I mean, it's transformed my life.
Yeah, it's I think it's a little bit too, like I think you know, probably less of a connotation, but like almost the same with like a psychologist or like a therapist, you know, in relationships where people, I don't need to see a relation, we don't need to see a therapist. We're fine. And it's not a matter of whether you're fine or not, because we're all have our flaws. It's a matter of like the mindset of like, do you have a learning mindset? Do you want to grow? And it's really hard to grow in a bubble or like by yourself or just like through reading without application, or somebody who's like keeping you accountable or challenging you, or even providing you context and new ideas and being able to give you a somewhat non-biased, perspective. Because especially when you're running a company, you could ask for feedback from all your employees. Well, they have a very different perspective, and they all have their own interests of how they want to interact with you. Whereas your coach, they only care about you succeeding as an individual. They want your business to succeed for sure. Right. But at the end of the day, they really care about you as an individual growing and performing. So I think that's what's really important about having a coach.
Yeah. I agree. And I think another thing that is unique, well, it's not unique, but it's something that a lot of entrepreneurs have, and very few have mastered it. And no one, if they say they mastered it, they probably are lying. But juggling family life and leadership to your team and business and everything in between, how has that balance been for you? Because I know you're a family man. So what has that been like for you, and what have you had to focus on, and where do you see the most opportunity as a dad?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It's a tough one because my wife and I work together. She helped start the company, and so we're co-founders, and we take on very different roles. Like I was running the company, kind of solo for the first couple of years, and then she joined about year 4 or 5. So she was essentially making all the money as a financial advisor in our early years, and then we needed an accountant, so she jumped on board. I think in 2014, I want to say, so about 6 years ago. And so I think it's different for every person, right? I think there's definitely a work-life balance, kind of concept out there for people. We kind of have this like, it's more like this work-life integration, and it's hard because we work together. We used to travel a lot, and so sometimes we bring our kids with us. We have 2 kids, and so it's kind of this integration of bringing our family with us. And so every year it looks a little different. As kids kind of are getting into school and all of that, it's figuring out when the right time is to cut off work and when to spend time with the family. But we don't see it as like this black and white, like, I go to work at like 7 and I come home at like 6 and then we don't talk about it. Like it's a very fluid, kind of day in, day out schedule, which I think is like, can be challenging sometimes, but on the other side, it's like kind of nice because you can like roll home at lunch and hang out with your kids. And then, if we're down visiting a customer for a week, we bring our kids with us, and it's kind of this unique experience to be able to like have our kids be there. And it's cool to see our kids kind of interact. And, some people are kind of like blown away by our daughter's vocabulary, or like she's really comfortable around adults. And I think that's partly because she's not always with us, but she's with us a lot of the times. And so when we have our leadership team offsites, she's interacting with adults and she's listening to conversations, and she'll come and just sit down and like listen to a meeting, and so yeah, I think that's a really cool, unique experience for her to see, and to hopefully give her the confidence in her life that, she can do whatever she puts her mind to. So I don't know, it's in a weird way, it's like it's a balance, but it's also, we kind of just look at it from like a, how are we doing in our individual buckets, and if like family is suffering a bit, then all right, we gotta scale back the work a little bit. But I think the cool part about working together is that we do have this ability to kind of have maybe deeper understanding, where we know that if it's like a week or 2 leading up to a board meeting, I'm going to be working a lot, right? And so my wife will step in, or like, hey, times are kind of slow, like let's just take off and have some family time. So
no, that's good, man. It's so funny because it's very similar. My wife has been my right-hand partner with the business for forever. And when at night, she'll be like, wait, are you talking to work Katie, or are you talking to wife Katie? What are we doing here? And our kids go with us everywhere, and it's very similar situation. So I completely understand. I wouldn't have it any other way. And I think that people need to really be focused on that balance and understanding that the sacrifice is across the board. You see any successful person in one discipline, in order for them to be successful across the board, everyone has to be on the same page with where those sacrifices lie. And sometimes it's not those standard hours, or sometimes it's not those different things, but the kids, your spouse, everyone has to kind of understand that and then embrace it. And I think that that's what makes it special.
Totally. And you know, I think the key thing there is I mean, this is an obvious one. It's like Captain Obvious here, but like communicating, right? Because if you're working with your spouse, and it's not for everybody, but I certainly wouldn't do it any other way, just because it's so fun to be able to spend so much time with our family. But it's, you know, when there are times where I am traveling a ton and I'm not around the family as much, it's like you can see it in like my daughter, right? And so it's one of those things where like if I'm not seeing it, my wife will notice and be like, hey, you know, we'd appreciate it if you'd like actually like turn down the travel schedule a little bit or whatever, and we're figuring it out as we go. But yeah, having that flexibility, you know, to be able to work at night or call it an early day in the afternoon and hang out with your kids, and then go back to, you know, after you put your kids down at 8 p.m. start working again. And so we work a ton, but at the same time we really enjoy, you know, we don't watch a ton of movies or a ton of TV, because after we put the kids down and eat dinner, we're excited about what we're working on, so we go back to work.
Yeah, man, I think it's awesome. I think that's what when we talk about it, that's what we want our kids to see too. We want them to see the discipline, we want them to see the sacrifice we're willing to do, but also the passion and the fun that we put into it, and it really empowers you for a life of impact. So it's cool to talk about, and then you instill that in your kids. And you were talking about now trying to find that leadership that you can install in your team, right? And I think that we say sales covers all sins, you know. So you get in this momentum and you're just going and going and going, and then this happens and everyone's like, wait. And you're fortifying, you know, contracts, and you're making sure everybody's good, and you're trying to talk to your team, and then it basically is an expedited evolution, right? And that's what it's been doing. How have you been focusing on building those leaders now in a time like this specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if I'm honest, I'm still trying to figure it out, right? I think, I think the first is like I've always kind of taken the approach of like, you got to have your house in order before, you know, anything else. And so we're kind of in this like reevaluation of like, what do we want the company to look like, and how do we want to see this, you know, as we make it through this time. And then from there, really, because it's remote, it's, you know, it's such an interesting time that it's like that constant communication of just checking in every single day, every single week with your leaders. And, I think vulnerability is a huge piece right now, because everybody's, you know, the emotions are high, and we're all kind of experiencing these wavelengths at different times, right? So I think the one way that we've been able to connect with our leadership team is just, you know, when we're checking in daily of just, hey, how's everybody doing? Where are you at on a scale of 1 to 10? Good, bad, horrible, you know, because it's, you kind of have that, you can like, it's kind of this like, if we're trying to get to 10 and I'm at a 4, you know, and somebody else is a 4, okay, how are we going to like make up that gap, right? And so it's nice when you have other people like, you know, a couple of days ago, man, I was just so low energy, kind of in the dumps. We had to, you know, lay off some people, and, but then our head of sales was like really excited about some deals coming down the pipeline. So you kind of feed off of each other. But I also think just giving people permission to be like, man, it just sucks. Like, I'm just not in a good spot today. I haven't worked out. I'm just tired of not seeing people, or whatever it is, right? I think that open and honest communication is super important.
Yeah, that's good, man. So what's next for you guys? Or it's evolving, right? Like, yeah. we're kind of in a spot where I'm like, man, this remote work, there's pros and cons to it, and there's some pros that we'll take, right? And there's some cons that we'll adapt, or the vulnerabilities will fill those holes. But there's a lot of this that will be positive benefits for years to come. So what have you guys noticed any of those? Yeah,
you know, checking with our team, I think a lot of people, obviously, there's that like, I just don't think you can ever replace the energy of being in the same room as somebody, you know, and like ideating or like talking about something or problem solving or meeting with a customer. I mean, you can never like video or technology will never get good enough, or at least I hope not, because I still think that like that physical presence is so important. I think with our team, you know, a lot of people are kind of like, oh wow, I don't have to commute. This is kind of nice, you know, or you know, you're seeing a lot of expenses, like people aren't eating out at lunch because they're not in the office, or, you know, they're at home making lunch, or they're not driving, so they're not spending money on gas. So I think there's this financial piece where people are like, oh, it's not too bad working from home. You know, and you look at that line item of an office and you're like, oh, it'd be kind of nice to get rid of that office expense. You know, so it'll be interesting as we emerge out of this, what that looks like. And obviously with like social distancing and then in offices and all these procedures, I mean, the office to one extent also kind of becomes a challenge until there's a cure for this, because, the amount of cleaning that's going to have to happen, and, if one employee gets infected but doesn't know it, and then who do they interact with? I mean, there's just such a web that's just kind of daunting right now. If I don't even know how to navigate through that. And I think a lot of us don't even know how to navigate through it, right? We've never had to navigate this, and so I think work from home we're just gonna have to get better at it. And, we were in the process before COVID of onboarding a sauna. And so I'm so glad we did, because it came in at such a good time where our teams are able to manage projects really, really well. So we're getting through it. What about you? What about you all? What's changed for you?
It's that communication, that daily communication. We do team check-ins in the morning. We this is something I learned from my coach too. It's like, his is mental performance coach. He's like, what's the most important thing you're going to do today? So boom, we identify that with everybody on grid. Bing, 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 bing. So we only have 15 people. Yeah. So it's not as it's pretty easy to burn through everybody. And then we go into at the end of the day and we kind of recap and do the same thing throughout the day. Though leadership meets and we have structured. But it kind of feels like death by meeting sometimes with those things too. So totally. There's a lot of pros with it where we have that accountability that we didn't have before that I think is really good. But I also think that there's overwhelm with that, and things tend to slip through the cracks sometimes with meetings or with client back and forth, right? So we're finding that balance. And then agreed though, the office space, we had a contract on a building right before this, and good thing that we were still in due diligence and we pulled it for this thing. But it also leaves some opportunities. I see some other brands that have farms and things like that they go to create content. And I'm just thinking, man, I've been thinking small. Now I'm trying to think bigger. And it's broken down a lot of barriers that I wouldn't have done otherwise, because I was concerned of, would it be acceptable?
Totally. Yeah. The work from home thing too. I always said, and I feel like I half believed it. I was always like, well, I don't care where you work as long as you get the job done, right? Yeah. But other people on the team were like, well, are they working? Or maybe they're like not putting in 40 hours. And I'm like, it's not about putting 40 hours in. It's about them getting the job done that's been described. So like, it's ultimately our fault if we don't provide them a big enough scope, or they don't clearly understand what their role is, And so now I feel like COVID's just blown the whole thing up, where it's like people are working from home and they're still working.
Yeah, exactly. Things, and I've always been real hard in the thought is like you, it's like nothing will replace, everyone should be here at all times. And I do think it's very important for culture, especially for us. We travel so much together. But I also think now I could see the light in some of that. So I in the remote side. So I don't know, man. I don't know what that mix will look like moving forward, but it's exciting. It's exciting times. And I'm glad that our team is really growth minded and, to your point, investing in coaching has been huge for us. And we have a coach that meets with our team every Monday morning. We go over our mission and our values and reiterate that. I noticed there was a gap, right? Like I couldn't do that as we grew. I couldn't keep pushing that through. And I saw that in some of our end of the year reviews and some of the stuff. I was wondering, like, why is this not aligning? I cannot imagine why this wouldn't align. And then I just figured, it's time to get some help with that, and it's been great for us. So continuing to double up on those types of things have been big.
That's good. That's important.
Power is literally everything to us. When you're a professional traveling as much as we do, we can't sacrifice on power to get the perfect shot.
The last thing you want to be worried about is your battery.
We're very selective with the brands that we trust.
Not sure if we're going to have a charging station, but we have an entire drawer full of core batteries.
Knowing that we have power, that we can trust, when we're out here on the road, makes all the difference.
Power is something that's easy to take for granted until it fails.
You risk losing your data, you risk losing the stuff that you just worked so hard on.
Without proper power, our equipment, no matter how great the technology, are paperweights.
Just wrapped our chute in the Philippines, tested them in the elements, the heat, the wind, the rain.
Usually when it's really cold, power gets zapped like that. It's freezing out here, and this power's been holding all day.
We rely on powering products that are designed to meet our rigorous demands, so we never miss a moment.
So we have the primes, we have the minis, different power solutions for different power needs.
They last forever. We got a visibility on how long we have on them.
Intelligent power and air travel certified.
To charge our phones and charge our devices.
There are some cool things Core has in the works. Stay tuned for the Helix. As the technology of our trade gets more complex, we're confident that the power we use will not only match it, but help bring it into the future.
The story doesn't stop for anyone, and that is why we choose CORE.
Now, if it will shift into another section. So that was a little bit of the story section. This is kind of like the pass it on section. This is basically where we ask a couple hot seat questions. And for us, it's really a big deal. We always enjoy this because I'm such a fan of high performers and anybody who's achieving great things. So I'm always interested to hear people's point of views on these different things. So I'll just burn through a couple with you. So what's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, there's been a lot. I think we had this great advisor, Dennis Madsen. He was the former CEO of REI, and he has a really cool story. He was like a stock boy at REI way back in the day, and then he ultimately rose and became CEO and helped them open up like 100 stores at REI. And so I think for high performers, we're in this mindset of like go, achieve like fast, in this sprint mentality, and that's good, and it can be good for certain things, right? But I'll never forget, he was like, Bryan, this is a marathon, not a sprint, and I think so often we get caught up in like, we got to go now, we got to move fast, and we're going to lose this opportunity. And that urgency is important, but also like, and I think especially in this COVID time, it's a reminder of like, whoa, there's some things that like I should have been paying attention to, but I was caught up in like the revenue, right? Or the sales, or just there was so much growth that like, growth forgives a lot of sins. And so kind of remembering that, it's life is a marathon, not a sprint. And so in that context, set that proper pace. And I think what's cool is like, when you think about the marathon analogy, you can run like a 8-hour marathon, or you could run like a 6 or 5 or 4 or 4-hour marathon, or it's like, it's that mindset of what is that pace, right? And how do you set that pace, as opposed to just like sprinting and getting tired out. So I think that one's always ringing true, especially now. Okay, so the next one, if you could go back 20 years and ask yourself and tell yourself something, what would it be? Gosh, especially in this day and age, man, enjoy the normalcy, or enjoy the commodification of life. I was talking to our team about just we talk a lot because people are asking like, how do you survive in the drinkware markets that's commoditized, blah blah blah. I'm like, everything's commoditized, so it's a matter of like, how do you rise and show up when it's a commodity? And I think, man, I think a lot of people, myself included, would say that I definitely took for granted the small things in life, like airplanes, a hug, like not thinking about a doorknob when you touch it, right? Like all that is just, man, 20 years ago, I'd be like, enjoy it. Yeah, it's crazy. It is crazy. Okay, so this is one we get a lot, and we get this question from young folks a lot is what would you tell a young listener who wants to change the world but doesn't know the next steps? Yeah, I think that's a good one. Yeah, I get asked that, I feel like, a lot, and I think I had a good unlock a couple of years ago where it was everybody wants to like add value, right? Like, how do I add value to this business, or I'm going to add so much value to this and that. And even when people hit you up and cold call you, it's all about adding value, right? And I think so few people take the time to figure out what they value before you add value back to somebody else. And I think that's something that I've been trying to spend a lot of time thinking about like, what do I actually value? And then does that reflect in what I'm trying to do as far as adding value back into people's life? Because it seems like everybody wants to rush ahead of like changing the world, but it's like, what matters to you first? Like, change your world and then go out and change the world, right? Because if you're just going out trying to change other people's worlds, like, you're not doing anybody any service. That's great. It's a very good one. Okay, cool. So what is one thing that every person should do every day? Oh man, breathe, clean, wash your hands. I think it's different for other people, but I think call it whatever you want, like prayer, meditation, silent. Just, I think that stillness, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of just being present and self-aware. And I mean, those are all like super buzzy, trendy words, but just, man, if it's in your car, it's at your house, wherever it is, just like take 5 for yourself and just think about the day before, the day ahead. I feel like in the hustle and bustle of life, it's so easy with your phone. I mean, I think back in the day, like, man, taking a dump or going to the bathroom was like enjoyable. You had like a couple minutes to yourself, and now it's like you got your phone and you're like scrolling through Instagram, and it's like
I deleted it.
Yeah, you did? Oh, nice.
I would get sucked into a vortex, and I just
totally
wasn't worth it.
Yeah, so I think put the phone down, every day and just enjoy life a little bit.
That's great. So you're a big reader. I hear you're a big leadership book reader. Can you name the top 3?
Oh yeah, I'd say. I mean, lately I've been reading some good zingers. I think. I mean, one of the top ones, especially for business, is The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. We operate our leadership team and kind of the structure of our company from that book, and it was a game changer because I was really struggling with how do we bring the right people together? What do we talk about? What's the cadence? What do you talk about in meetings? Should you have meetings? What kind of meetings should you have? It just lays out such a simple framework of providing clarity to your team. So I think that one's really good. Principles by Ray Dalio came out a couple years ago. That one kind of blew up and was good. It's really heady. Like you read it and you're like, whoa, this is a really deep framework. But the way he's been able to distill it down to just kind of this upward loop, of kind of looping, and you're going to fail and you're going to come back and learn and then go forward. 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And I think that one's really good. This isn't really like there's a couple. So like Ryan Holiday, I think, is an excellent writer. He wrote The Obstacle is the Way and Ego's the Enemy. Ego's the Enemy I read every year, just as a good reminder of, mindset.
Okay, so what's more important, having a mentor or being a mentor?
Oh man, having.
Yeah. You can't be one unless you have one, right?
Totally. Yeah. It's funny because I just had I felt like I finally was like, oh wow, I'm getting older. Because the university I went to called me up and they're like, hey, we want you to be a mentee to some kids or some college kids, and I was like, oh what? You want me to do what? I was like, I don't have anything to provide to these kids. They're like, no, try it out. And it felt so weird, like trying to mentor somebody. I was like, man, I just want more help.
Well, it gives you an appreciation for people with true patience and the ability to really invest in someone. At least for me, when I'm just like, man, it's a gift.
Totally.
Okay, so this one's my favorite one that I ask everybody, and it's become a favorite for everyone here. It's if you could issue a 1-week challenge to our listeners that would have to start today, that would dramatically change their lives, what would it be?
I'd probably, that's a tough one. There's like two things I would think about that would dramatically change your life, but I'm gonna go with like the more odd one. I think if people just did like 10 push-ups and sit-ups a day for the rest of their life, it would change their life. And the reason I say that is because, well, especially now more than ever, like fitness, people are learning that like, oh, COVID's kind of, if you're not in shape, it's not good, right? Like you got to have good lung capacity. But I've always been fascinated by like these people who live to like 104 or whatever, and they're like still doing pull-ups, right? And it's like, they didn't just magically get on a fitness program when they were 80. They were active their entire life, and they just did that daily. I think it's a representation of that, just that those small things every single day add up throughout your entire life. So take it for an actual physical push-up or just a physical, like a mental push-up of, being thankful for 10 things in the morning, that daily just little nugget I think is super important.
And it becomes easier and easier, and then you get addicted to the results too,
Exactly. Habit forming. Yeah.
All right, action. So we'll do our live and we'll do our close-up here.
Scene 101A, take 3.
Guys, is this my trailer?
Let's do one of these and then we're good. All right, ready? Oh, that storm is blasting. That sun comes out for real right there. That's worth the fight.
3, 2, 1. Woo!
I know you're passionate about generosity, but that married with the idea of transparency inside of that. Can you talk a little bit about what that means to you and how you can bring those two values together?
Yeah. So for us, I think when I started MiiR early on, my wife and I were talking about how like people just weren't transparent about it. It was always kind of, when people were giving in businesses, it was like a net profit or kind of like people didn't want to either divulge what they were doing or they were using it as like a marketing scheme, of like, oh, we'll use this to get more customers, as opposed to like doing it to make the world better. And so for us, we were like, well, the antidote to like inauthentic giving is just to be transparent, because if you're transparent, you're not hiding behind anything. And so for us from day one, it was always about, hey, here's how much we're giving. Here's where we're giving it to. And all of our products, as you probably know, have like a code on it so people can follow along the journey of generosity at MiiR, of where we've granted, how much, why, where. And so I think giving is, I think giving without transparency, is okay, but I think, man, there's something magical about just being open and honest about with what you're doing and how you're doing it, and hopefully inspiring others to kind of live a life of generosity as well. So, I'm a big fan, and not, I don't think transparency also means I don't think that means shouting it from the rooftops. I think it's a matter of, because there's plenty of people who are generous without talking about it, which I also think is great. But I think it's great when brands, especially brands, can be transparent about it.
How do you choose the folks that you give to?
Yeah, so we kind of have, we started off with giving to clean water. Clean drinking water kind of felt like a natural for us, and it was kind of this natural happening where my wife was nannying for the CEO of Hulu back in the day in college. And so Jason Kyler, who started Hulu, he was like, hey, I'm working on this project. I can't tell you about it. And then eventually in 2009, he's like, hey, I've been working on this thing called Hulu. I'd love for you to beta test it. So we're beta testing Hulu. And what's really cool is Jason had given free ad space to Charity Water. So Scott Harrison, who started Charity Water, got this ad space on Hulu early on in 2009. And Scott broke it down that close to 1 billion people lacked access to clean water. And it kind of just hit me, right in the face of, hey, we're going to sell water bottles. Let's give to clean water. That seems like a natural evolution. So we started off with clean water, and then it kind of emerged throughout the years of MiiR in that, we work a lot with companies like Patagonia and in the environment, and everything's kind of intertwined between environmental and social causes. And so we kind of look at them right now in 3 buckets of clean water, and clean water could be drinking water. It could be, clean water, clean systems, clean rivers, and then healthy environment. So that's, we've done some granting to help clean up the environment. We just actually, yesterday was Earth Day. We just announced that we're part of climate neutral, so we're offsetting 100% of our carbon emissions as a company every single year. So that was a big commitment for us. And then the third thing is strong communities, and these are kind of big, broad buckets, but they give us guardrails as to what we give to and for. So that's kind of how we think about it. A lot of people will hit us up, and we've done a couple cool things where we have an employee-led grant team. So I think last year they gave about $30,000 away to a couple nonprofits locally. And so every year they go through the grant-making process, and they're able to kind of see and partake in the generosity too. And it doesn't have to fall in those kind of 3 buckets that we talk about. It could be, street artists in Seattle who are maybe on the fringe of being in school, not in school, and helping them use art as therapy. So there's a bunch of great nonprofits that we get that our employees get involved in.
That's awesome. So what's the future hold?
Oh, that's a great question right now. I think digital, obviously. Online, online sales for us has been doing pretty well, all things considered. I think for us, it's what's really cool is, we have set out to be an impact brand, to be a company that's known for making great products and then also being very generous. And so, for us, that'll always be true to who we are, regardless of the economic conditions. And so we'll have to adjust and adapt. And, I certainly think we've always had coffee at home kind of in the pipeline with our Porigami and our coffee canister, but we're constantly looking at, okay, what do we extend within that category as people continue to stay at home? Are there other products that, we can make better than what's on the marketplace? And so I think that's really exciting, and just trying to be a better business. We're offsetting 100% of our carbon, like I said earlier, and it's just trying to do our best and at the time and then constantly evolve. So we'll hope that we make it through this crisis and just keep our ear to the ground and take advantage of all the opportunities that we can.
You guys will get it. You guys have a huge brand, and it's such impact. And like I said, everyone here is fans. Everyone here is fans of what you're doing, and it's beyond a product. Like I said, although we love the product, it's a message. Even the tags on there tells a story. So everything you do is making an impact and inspires people. So we appreciate your time.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for being such a good customer.
Yeah, man. Yeah, happy to do it. Big thanks to Bryan Papé for today's interview. You can check him out at Bryan Papé on Instagram, and make sure you go to MiiR.com to check out all their products and the incredible things they're doing.